Series sell. Regardless of what industry you work in, it's easier to retain an old customer than it is to gain a new one. In writing, when you have a book series, you're retaining those old customers, your old readers, because they're going to continue along in your series. That's easier than constantly trying to pitch a new standalone to readers. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't write standalones. I'm just saying sometimes it's nice to throw a series in there to help you retain your readers. It's kind of like when you go to a restaurant and you order the same meal every time. You get that meal because you love it, and you know you won't be disappointed. Readers return to series because they love them, and they know they're not going to be disappointed. So today I want to talk about the 3 types of book series writing best practices. There are 3 main types of book series. That's dynamic, static, and anthology. Before you get started drafting any type of series, it's good to know which of those 3 you're writing, because that way you know which parts of your story to pull out for your readers and focus on. This is Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers, because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, editor and writer. Let's start with the dynamic book series. A dynamic book series follows the same character or cast of characters across multiple books as they try and accomplish some large goal. What that means is each book is connected by plot as well as characters. So these are more like movies or miniseries. Think Lord of the Rings, not a regular TV show. Because they are plot-driven, that means that a dynamic book series does need to be read in order. It also means that that plot element is the most important. That's what's pulling your readers back. It's what's helping you retain them. So you need to make sure you have a rock-solid plot. Dynamic book series are common in genres like science fiction, fantasy, young adult, and middle grade. When I say that dynamic series are common in those genres, I don't mean those are the only genres that write that type of series. I just mean that if you're writing within that genre, you're probably more likely to choose a dynamic series over one of the other 2. Some well-known dynamic book series are The Giver Quartet by Louise Lowry, The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer, and The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. Notice most of these are science fiction and fantasy. Dynamic series are also really common in trilogies. A trilogy is basically one big story, and instead of having an individual book broken up by 3 acts, each of those 3 acts in the classic story structure gets its own book. So a dynamic style book series lends itself really well to a trilogy. If you're writing a trilogy, there's a good chance it's a dynamic series. Because a dynamic series is all about the plot, you do need to do a little bit of outlining or plotting before you get started. You need to know where you're going. Now, I've talked to lots of writers who've written multiple dynamic book series, and the ones who pantsed one, who flew by the seat of their pants, didn't outline at all before they first started, said that they spent a lot of time in revision and rewriting, and that they wished they had done a little bit of outlining beforehand so they would have saved that time later. Now, if you're not a classic outliner, you don't have to go chapter by chapter or scene by scene. You maybe just want to know what the major plot of each book is and what the major character arc of each book is. That way you know a little bit of where you're going and how everything is interwoven. So remember, a dynamic series is about that plot. Next, let's talk about the static book series. In a static book series, readers follow the same character or cast of characters, but each book is not necessarily connected by plot. It still can be, but a static series is more character-driven than plot-driven. So this is like a TV series, where you're coming back to revisit those characters, and every episode isn't necessarily connected to the episode that came before it. Think of something like Bones. especially in the earlier seasons. Now, because static book series are character-driven, that does mean that you need to spend a lot of time developing those characters. And just because they don't have to be connected by plot doesn't mean they're not always. The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher are loosely connected by plot, especially in the earlier books. What that means is a reader could probably read book 2 or 3 without having read book 1 and be able to follow what's happening. But in that case, it is a little bit easier if you read them in order. That's kind of how most static series go. Technically, you don't have to read them in order, but especially into the later books, it does help. Static book series are very common in mystery-style books. So, murder mysteries, detective stories, urban fantasy with a crime-solving element, that sort of a thing. They're also very common in chapter books for kids and other types of mysteries. Examples of static book series include most of Agatha Christie's books, the Mercedes Thompson series by Patricia Briggs, and the Nancy Drew novels. Because static book series don't have some big finale that they are working towards, they tend to be longer than dynamic series. You can basically keep writing them until you run out of ideas for your characters. Along those lines, that's kind of how I recommend plotting or planning a static book series. If you are writing something that's character-based, you do need to spend a lot of time developing that character, so character worksheets and notes are your friend, especially to help you keep track of those little details that you might forget along the way. And you might want to sit down one day and think about all of the things that could possibly happen to your character or your cast. List them, even if they're not related or small. Then take a look at those events or situations or conflicts and loosely arrange them into books. Maybe some are a major plot. Maybe some are more of a subplot. Maybe some arc across 2 books. After you do that, you will have a rough idea of how many books you might have in that series. Of course, as you write, you will always come up with more ideas, but that will give you a blueprint to go by. Now that we've talked about the plot and character-based series, let's move on to the anthology book series. An anthology series is tied together by the world, setting, or character relationships. That means it's not following the same character or cast of characters for every book. It might have some books where it follows the same set of characters, and some books where it follows different ones. But the reason a reader returns to an anthology series is for that place, not necessarily a specific character or plot. In this way, it's more like a franchise. Think of the Marvel or DC universe, where each movie or storyline or comic is taking place in the same universe, the same world, but might be following different characters along their journey and their character arcs. So the anthology book series is all about the setting. That's what you need to bring out and explore through your books. However, an anthology series can be made up of many dynamic and static series. It's really common to have a handful of different trilogies all in the same world or setting, where each trilogy might focus on a different character's journey. The same thing for static series within an anthology series. You might have different branches in your anthology series that are following different characters. Anthology series are common in science fiction and fantasy again because of that world. People love to return to fantasy for the magic system you've created, or to sci-fi for the planets you've explored. It's also really common in romance, historical, and literary fiction. In this case, it's about the relationships between the characters and a setting like a small town. So readers are returning to see what's going on with all of these different people. How are they all connected in this place? In romance in particular, this anthology series works well because you might have a different book that's dedicated to each sibling's love story, or to the love story of each person in an office or on a sports team. Examples of anthology book series include Vladimir by Mercedes Lackey. She has a ton of books in that series. The Once Upon a Time novels by Dennis L. McKiernan, and the Star Wars books. The Star Wars books is an excellent example of how an anthology series can actually be written by different authors, too. Anthology series can be the largest of all of them, because it can include those dynamic and static series within it. An anthology series is all about that place, so you do need to do your world building homework. That means you need to make it clear what time period and era we're in, what the environment is like, everything from climate to buildings, and what the society is like. That society element is particularly important in an anthology series. You also need to understand how all of the characters are related to each other, so you know who might pop up in whose book. And the third element I want to mention when it comes to an anthology series are minor characters. Minor characters in anthology series become a part of that setting that your reader wants to return to. Think of Hogwarts. If a person says, I want to go and visit Hogwarts, they're not just expecting the castle and the magic to be there. They're also expecting Peeves, the poltergeist ghost, maybe Hagrid in his hut, and some of those other minor characters who popped up in the books here and there. Those have become a fixture, a part of that environment. So make sure you develop your minor characters so they're memorable and can act as that through thread for your books. Next, I want to share an editor's thoughts on crafting a book series. When crafting a book series, doing a little bit of planning, at least, before you start writing is going to help you a lot in the long run. You're committing to hundreds of thousands of words when you commit to a book series. That's a lot of words. So make sure you know where you're going, what you're doing, what you might want to do with those words. Again, you don't have to plot chapter by chapter or scene by scene, but you do need to brainstorm. That might mean a mind map or a bubble cluster. It might mean taking a couple of long walks and really thinking through your story. It might mean doing a traditional outline. You'll have to find what works best for you and know that each series might be a little bit different, but thinking things through in some way is going to save you a lot of time when it comes to revision and rewriting. It's going to make your life easier. Now that I've freaked you out with how many words are in a book series, I do want to remind you that when you sit down to write, you just need to focus on one moment, one scene, one piece of a chapter at a time. Don't think about that whole series or how much you have left. Think about that one moment in your characters' lives that you're going to write at that sitting. As Anne Lamott would say, take it bird by bird. Now it's up to you to figure out which type of series you're writing so you know which of those aspects you really need to bring out and focus on. So, which series are you writing? Share it in the comments below. And for more videos on book series and other aspects of writing, subscribe to Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers. Because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, editor and writer. To find out more about me, go to www.ignitedinkwriting.com. There you will also find a guide to building strong settings. This will help you, regardless of which type of series you're writing, bring out that setting and make that place a through thread. And now it's your turn to figure out if you're writing a dynamic, a static, or an anthology book series, so you know if you should bring out the plot, the characters, or the setting to ignite your ink.